Hey everyone, I just did a video on meeting with executives. And this is a bit of part two here. There are going to be quite a few videos coming up. Um, I realized that, I'm telling you these things, and again, found it's important that we're all in agreement of what the proper foundations are for actually selling to an executive. Because you can keep adding on all of these tips and tricks, right? But as I said in the last video, if you're building the tower this way and the executive's over here, right, it's just you're never gonna match up, right? So, part two, right? The one thing I want to talk about right now is we often overestimate how simple our pitch has to be, and how easy it is to sell that executive if you're solving their problem that they have, right? If it's a major thorn in their side. Once you accept that, you realize that there isn't much else that matters. Once you accept that, you realize that that it doesn't actually take much to get them to work with you, right? But it just has to be the right one. So everything you do has to be in service of figuring out what that problem is and positioning for it, right? Now, sometimes you're just not going to align. He needs A, you're doing B. He wants an apple, you're selling oranges, right? With enterprise selling, there is quite a bit of gray area, and there are good salespeople who will tell you to like line up with this executive priority so you can sell the solution. And at the end of the day, right, our close rates are still what they are. They're not perfect, which means you're not ever going to be able to convince anyone. But one of these solid foundations, like I said in the last meeting, making sure that meeting is meaningful as opposed to trying to make it lucrative, right? The next foundation here is you often overestimate what it takes to actually get people to pull the trigger. If what you're selling can be positioned as something that actually solves their problem, you won't have to do much. You're not going to have arguments. Maybe in the beginning, there's going to be some banter. They might give you a hard time. After all, you are a salesperson, right? They love to give salespeople hard times. But, and this is the other thing, is it can be very simple, okay? I sold, and just as an example for you here, in my last startup, I sold a $250,000 a year deal. It was a 3-year contract for $250,000 a year. And we get into that meeting with these senior executives, and he sees it. And he only wanted to see about 5% of everything that we were doing for him. He wanted to see just this tiny little widget. And he said, if you guys can do this and you can do it for all of my patients, we're selling into healthcare, done. The deal is yours, right? What does that say to us? It should say to us that we overcomplicate the heck out of this thing because we think, wow, $250,000, holy shit, that's a lot of money. That could used to be able to buy me a house, right? It still can in some areas. So it should be really complex, right? And the truth is, for whatever reason, it's not, right? Simple is what sells, even in these extremely complicated decision maker meetings. And I'm sure there are exceptions to this, right? Big, like massive capex purchases, like you name it. But at the end of the day, these people care about simple value propositions. So to reiterate, solid foundations before we go adding on all of these tips and tricks, right, to sell that executive. Solid foundation. Make that meeting as meaningful as possible as opposed to making it as lucrative as possible. And also, don't overestimate how simple what you're selling needs to be, or whatever the phrase is, right? Make it so simple that the executive totally understands what's going on, okay? Don't play games with yourself. Don't think it needs to be overcomplicated. Don't think it needs to cure cancer, right? It can be very simple as long as it's solving their problem.